initiative, um, and it's all about building public awareness on the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll tell you a little bit more about the goals in a minute, but basically we build awareness but through coming together at cafes. And at these cafes, we kind of learn about the goals and we offer a space for people to have conversation, to share their views on various local and global issues. We do this with individuals and groups all across Ireland. And as Billy says, we're also funded by Irish Aid. And um, Irish Aid, as we say, is the International Development Programme for Ireland. Their aim is to reduce poverty, hunger, and humanitarian need, with particular focus on sub-Saharan Africa by supporting long-term development, providing humanitarian assistance in over 80 countries. On behalf of the Irish people, collectively, we Irish Aid are helping to build better futures for some of the world's poorest communities. And one of the ways that Irish Aid do this is they help build national policy. So they've developed a better world, which is Ireland's policy for international development. And this provides a framework for Ireland's expanding development cooperation programme in line with the government's commitment to reaching the UN target of allocating 0.7% of our gross national income to official development assistance by 2030. And it outlines Ireland's vision of a more equal, peaceful and sustainable world. And if you want to find out some more information about that policy, you can log on to irishaid.ie. So we're here today to learn a bit about the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm hoping that you've already heard about the goals, but if not, this is a good opportunity to learn a bit more about them. So basically, the Sustainable Development Goals were established in 2015 by the United Nations. They're a set of 17 goals, and at the UN General Assembly in 2015, 193 countries agreed to work together to try and achieve these goals by 2030. And as you can see here, this is the 17 goals. So it starts with no poverty. So this is where we're kind of going to look at trying to eliminate poverty across the world. And it goes through various different issues, including education, and then looking at access to clean water, affordable and clean energy, working to kind of build better cities where we have reduced inequalities and the cities are more sustainable. We look at taking action on climate, and it ends in goal 17, which is all about partnership for the goals. So working together to really try and address these 17 issues to make the world a much better place for us all to live. So for today, we've decided to group the goals in 5 categories. So this is the 5 pillars of sustainability. So we've grouped the first set of goals under people. So these are the goals that affect people. Then we look at the goals that affect our planet, that affect prosperity across the world, and peace and partnership. And I'd like to just pop up a poll now, and I'd like you to click on what set of what groupings you think is most important that we should nationally look at trying to achieve by 2030. So if you can see, a little poll should have popped up on your screen, and if you just pick what you think is the most important groupings to try and work towards. Okay, so we can see that there's kind of a tie between people has just come down on top, with peace coming second. So I'll just end that poll. This is in fact a kind of a trick question. Well, not so much a trick question, but we know that the goals were developed to be all looked at holistically. We can't really achieve the goals unless we look at them all. They're all very much interlinked. And when we see progress in one goal, that's an offset, and we see an advantage or benefit in the other goals. So they are all completely interlinked, and no goal, even though they're numbered, does not take priority over any other goal. So for today, we're going to take a special focus on Sustainable Goal 3, which is good health and well-being. And the aim of this goal is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. It really looks at building kind of sustainable health systems that we can all have access to. And like all the other goals, there's a set of targets that this goal is used to measure this goal and measure our progress in this goal. So the targets for good health and well-being include reducing maternal mortality, ending preventable deaths, universal healthcare for all, and providing accessible and affordable vaccines and medication, and also looking at how we can improve early warning systems for global health risks. And we've chosen to look at this goal today just in light of COVID-19 and our individual experiences over the last year. And also we're all very aware of the pressures that's been put on our health systems here in Ireland and as well globally. So unfortunately, we also know that due to climate change, the chances of future pandemics is actually quite high. So it's really important that we kind of look towards building really robust health systems for our future. And on that note, I'm really delighted to welcome my colleague Thokozani. As Billy said, she works for Concern Worldwide in Malawi. And our programs, much like HelpAge in Malawi, supported by funding through Irish Aid. So it's a country that you might not know a lot about, but we are actually all have a connection to the work that goes on there. So I'm very, very delighted to welcome Thokozani to do her presentation on Malawi.
Hi everyone. Let me just start my video. Okay, here we go. Hi. So like Amy said, my name is Thokozani Kalanche. I work with Concern in Malawi. I'm the graduation program manager there. Thank you, Amy, for introducing the SDG 3 Good Health and Well-being. And I'll talk about what Concern does in Malawi with regard to this SDG. But maybe before we get to that, I'll talk a little bit about our little country. Next slide, please. So Malawi is in the southern part of Africa. It is a very small country. You can see it there in red. It's not very clear, but that's how small we are compared to other countries. So our country is landlocked. Well, landlocked, yes, but then we have the third largest freshwater lake in Africa. And another thing that Malawi is known for is we have a big mountain, Mulanje Mountain, which is about 3,000 meters above sea level. And this is a big tourist attraction and it is very nice to hike. I didn't put it here on the slide, but another thing that Malawi is known for is that we have very friendly people. So whenever you come to Malawi, don't be surprised when everyone greets you. They get excited when they see tourists and visitors. Malawi, despite being a very small country, but we have a high population. As of this year, we're about 18 million people. And the main religions in Malawi are Christianity and Islam, where Christianity has the most people and Islam comes second. For the languages that are spoken in our country, we have the local language, which is known as Chichewa, or some call it Nyanja. It's very similar to Zambia's language. And we also speak English, which is the official language, because if you have a secondary education or tertiary education, you do that in English. The average household size is 4.4 people per household, which has just reduced in the last year or so because we're at maybe about 6 people per household. Um, and despite being a small country, but access to electricity is very tough, where only 11% have electricity in their homes, and the rest maybe use charcoal or firewood for cooking. And now they use solar lamps or kind of to light their homes. We have high issues of teenage pregnancies where last year it was at 29% of teenagers who got pregnant before they got to the age of 30. Malawi also suffers from high rates of malnutrition, especially chronic malnutrition, to be specific, stunting, which is children who are short for their age, and this is a form of the extreme form of malnutrition. So we have 37% of the children under 5 who are stunted. This is a very high number for Malawi, but we're making progress because we managed to reduce it from, I think, 43, if not 41% in the last 4 years. Life expectancy in Malawi has just gone up. It's not so good, but now the average life expectancy is at 55.5, 55 years old for the Malawian population, where the males have a lower life expectancy, that is 54 for males, and females can live up to 56 years of age. Next slide, please. So Malawi has its own set of problems, but I'll just talk about a few. The major problem that Malawi has is extreme poverty, where we have almost half of the population which lives below $1 a day. And this is the biggest problem that we have. We also have diseases which affect the Malawian population, one of which is HIV and AIDS, where we have 8.8% of the population infected. Other diseases which affect us as tropical regions, for example, cholera and other under five diseases like diarrhea and the like. Another problem that we affects us a lot in Malawi is climate change, where at first we had rainy season which was going up to 6 months, but now we have rainy season which is about 3 or 4 months. So for crops that require long rainy season, these don't do so well with the climate change, and this is actually an area which Concern is working on to help households to mitigate this climate change. So this climate change also comes with food insecurity, and for this year, the government has predicted that 2.6 million people will suffer from food insecurity during the lean season. So for about 4 to 6 months, 2.6 million people won't have enough food for their households. We have high unemployment rate in Malawi, especially for the youth, and this also affects income which households have. Our country, despite being poor, but those in power have been known to be involved in corruption, which depletes the public resources as well. A major problem that we also have in Malawi is the weak healthcare system. You can see on the photo on the right, this is a maternity ward. These are women who are waiting to deliver their babies, but then the hospitals are overcrowded, so some are forced to sleep on the floor, some are forced to share beds, as you can see in the pictures. And also, just to highlight, we have in Malawi about 50 ICU beds in the public hospitals. So you can imagine a population of 18 million people having 50 ICU beds. And I'll get later to COVID, but we always had 7 ventilators in the whole country. Luckily, or maybe unlucky for us, when COVID hit, we got some donations from other countries. So now we've gone up from 7 to 80 ventilators for the whole country. Next slide, please. So, talking about the population of older persons in Malawi, we only have 5.1% of 18 million people who are above 60 years of age, where 5.6 are female and 4.5 are male. And of the older population, we find that older women ranked higher that they never attended school. That is to say that more women have never attended school than male, where 65% of population above 60 years of age have never attended school, as compared to older men, where 33% have never attended school. In terms of being economically active above the age of 60 years of age, we have 97% of women who are economically active and also 97% of male who are economically active. For this older population, the top five sources of livelihoods are casual labor, organyo. This is where we have people maybe going to dig or to cultivate in the fields of other people just so they can make money for that day to buy food. Some also sell food crops, especially maize. Some find their income from other sources, like maybe selling non-food items, plates, or maybe they're involved in arts and crafts. Another source of livelihood for the older population in Malawi are the cash crop sales. So the main cash crop which is sold in Malawi is tobacco. So we have the population above 60 years old maybe cultivating tobacco just so they can sell it. And some are involved in entrepreneurship or maybe small trade, just to make sure that they have enough money for their household. In terms of pension, not a lot of people have pension in Malawi because, like I said, we suffer from high rates of unemployment. So for the population above 60 years of age, we only have 2.1% who have pension as their source of livelihood. And the government has a social cash transfer program, and when we analyzed how many household heads which are above 60 years old get this government social cash transfer program, it was only 1% which get the government social cash transfer program. But these are the households which have someone heading which is above 60 years of age. And we also have a government social cash transfer program, a government public works program where people maybe will have to go grade the road or maybe dig up roads and stuff like that. But it's only 0.3% of the older population who are involved in this government public works program. Another characteristic of the older population in Malawi is that they own fewer assets than those that are below 60 years of age because of the problems that are cited above. Yeah. Next slide, please. So, in terms of programs for the elderly that are there in Malawi, we don't have a lot. Actually, I tried to do a lot of digging, but I only found two. The first one is the government social cash transfer program. This one, the government says it reaches 50% of the elderly, but when they say 50% of the elderly, they just mean households which have the elderly in their homes. And the other statistic was the one that I mentioned, where the government social cash transfer program reaches only 1.1% of households which have people older than 60 years old as the household heads. So those are the two discrepancies in terms of figures. The government is also talking about introducing an elderly social pension scheme, because there are a lot of elderly people who are suffering, people above 80 years of age who are living alone and who don't have any source of income. But this is in pipeline, and we're hoping the earliest that this can be introduced is next year, or if not next year, then probably 2022. Yep. So in terms of what Concern Worldwide in Malawi is doing, we work a lot on linkages and referrals because we have staff or volunteers who are in the communities, in the villages. So these ones, when they find that there are households with elderly persons who are facing different issues, they link them to the government counterparts so that they can be linked to appropriate programs that can assist them. Another thing that we do as Concern Malawi is on resilience programming, one of which is livestock persons. So for these ones, we try to identify the vulnerable households like the elderly, and maybe we'll give them chickens or goats so that when these chickens or goats reproduce, they can be able to pass them on to other people. And another thing that we do are the food security programs to ensure that these households do not suffer from hunger. So we promote climate smart agriculture practices, we promote home gardening and other food security programs just to ensure that they have enough food in their homes. We also are involved in social protection programs. Uh, for example, we have the graduation program, which does cash transfers. We also have an EU funded program, which does cash transfers as well. The first program I talked about, the graduation program, is funded by Irish Aid. So in terms of cash transfers, we do manual transfers. That is to say, every month we take money physically to these households for their consumption support, for them to buy food to eat in their homes, and for whatever it is else that they need. So the value that we give them for the Irish Aid funded is about 15,000 Malawi kwacha, which is around 15 or 16 euros, depending on the rate of the day. So these ones are given to them each and every month. Another one is a public works program. We did food for work program, but because of the physical activity that is involved in this program, we usually don't have a lot of people above 60 years participating. But the best one has been on the cash transfers. Yeah, next slide. So, finally, for COVID in Malawi, Malawi has been lucky because we haven't had a lot of COVID cases. You can imagine that to date, we've only had 5,890 confirmed cases. And during these last 2 months, we've been having fewer and fewer cases per day. For example, the statistics I'm showing here from yesterday's report. So, yesterday we only had 3 new cases, and currently we only have 416 active cases. In terms of deaths, we've had 183 total deaths since COVID came to Malawi, which was in April this year. But on the other hand, we're not doing as many tests as other countries because since April we've only done 60,000 tests. And there was a time in the country we only had about 1,000 test kits available, and some districts in the country do not have test kits. So testing is prioritized for those that are showing severe symptoms. You can be showing minor symptoms and the government will refuse to test you because we don't have enough test kits. So maybe that's also why we have fewer cases. So in terms of how people are feeling about COVID in Malawi, people were scared at first when it just came to Malawi, but then afterwards, when they saw that the cases were declining per day, I don't know if we have a false sense of security or we really have fewer cases of COVID-19 in Malawi. But people now are just like COVID is done. So people are back to normal. People are going to parties. People are going to clubs. Actually, there's a big music festival happening at the lake this weekend, which will have hundreds of people. So people just feel like COVID is done, unfortunately. Yeah, so thank you for listening to my presentation. This is about Malawi, good health and well-being, and COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thokozani. I wondered if you could just stay online for one more second, and if we had any questions from people, you can type it into the chat, and we can see there was like a lot of information in Thokozani's presentation. Really interesting to see the difference, to see the even to think that only 5% of 18 million people are over the age of 60 in Malawi. It's very different to Ireland. And to think of that people are still work to such an older age as well, and we have the opportunity here to retire usually when we're about 65. I would say Thokozani touched on the work that Concern does there, and she talked about the agricultural support that we give, and the Climate Smart Agriculture is a very interesting program. It really teaches people how to work with their resources when you have extreme weather. So if you're going through extreme drought or you're going through extreme periods of flooding. So I would definitely recommend logging on to the Concern website and finding more about that program. It's very interesting. And I hope you found it also interesting to think about how people have access to their income in um, in Malawi. In here, we're all entitled to our state pension, but obviously in Malawi it's quite different, and they rely on maybe cash transfers, which are sometimes, as Thokozani said, they're brought to people's houses. In fact, um, there. So if there's anybody have any questions?
I just see, Amy, I was looking at the chat there and I see that one question was that, like, are people wearing masks in Malawi? That was a question.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because people in Malawi they are and they aren't. What I mean is, for example, if you're going to a restaurant or if you're going into a shop, if they have the sign that says no mask, no entry, then people will wear a mask. But if you're in public gathering, people are not wearing masks. People have stopped wearing masks.
And Thokozani, thank you for that. You mentioned also about the cash transfer program that that Concern are involved with, and HelpAge are also involved in advocating for the older person cash transfer pension. The Irish Embassy in Malawi, I know, are supporting that program through Irish Aid. Could you maybe give us a little bit more information about the cash transfer program?
The government cash transfer or our cash transfer?
The one I suppose that the one you're using, and the government one I suppose as well, because they both kind of fit together, don't they, in a way?
Yeah, they do. So the government's cash transfer program, basically what they do is every 2 months, they give you a lump sum amount of money for those particular 2 months. So this amount of money that they get depends on how many people are in their household. So it ranges from 8,000 kwacha, which is about €8 per household, to maybe 20,000 kwacha, which is around €20 per household. Like I said, depending on number of dependents. But then the concern social cash transfer program, for us, it's standardized. We give everyone €16 per month, and this is done monthly as compared to the government, which is done every other 2 months. And the unique thing about our social cash transfer program is that we also build skills. We don't just give them money and then that's it. We'll see you next month. No, so we do household visits. We visit each household twice a month. We train them in gender. We train them in business skills. And then after they finish their business skills training, they develop a business plan. And then we fund this business plan where each household gets around €110 to start a business. So afterwards, because we know that ours is limited to only 12 months, then they have this business which they started with our support, which will now be sustaining them. Whereas the government social cash transfer program has been going on for years, for about 4 years. They at first they didn't have a clear exit strategy, but now they're trying to get people off the government social program, those that have done well, that is, and then get more people into the program. But they didn't do the business skills training, they didn't do the household visits, the counseling for the households.
Okay. Thank you, Thokozani. That's very interesting to hear. We've had a question from Lynn, who I suppose wonders about as people age in Malawi, are there facilities, are there kind of like what residential care settings that we would have, nursing homes that we would have here in Ireland? Do older people remain in their home environment all their lives, or are there facilities like that as people age?
No, actually, we do not have any nursing homes in Malawi. So when people age, they stay with either their children or sometimes, in the worst scenarios, they're probably alone in a village somewhere in a very bad house.
Okay, so that's obviously something that's quite different to how we live here. And you mentioned that, sorry, and there is a thing that Malawi has 7% of the world's fresh water. And the question then is fishing and part of the diet? Is fish part of the diet of people? And is fresh? I'll start that again. And is it distributed throughout the country? You mentioned obviously the lake and the size of the lake. So do people fish in that lake, and do they send that food to other people around the country, around the rest of Malawi?
Yeah, so we have a very delicious species of fish in Malawi known as tilapia, or locally known as chambo. It is very delicious. When you visit, please try it. So people do fish a lot in the lake, and so this type of fish I'm talking about is very expensive. One fish will go for about €10, or maybe 15. Sorry, 10. 10 or €1, €1, between €1 and €5. And then we have other smaller types of fish which are much cheaper, which are very delicious. So yeah, fishing is a very big part of Malawi. It's a very big part of our diet, and also people make a lot of money through fishing in Malawi.
Thanks so much, Thokozani. That was really fab presentation, and thanks for staying on the line to take those questions. The next part of our workshop today is that we take the opportunity to try and have an open conversation about some of the things that we've learned about today, and think about the SDGs. And I hope that you saw during Thokozani's presentation how many of the sustainable development goals that Concern is working towards achieving there in Malawi. So we were hoping to do breakout rooms, but I'm not sure if that's possible.
For some reason, yeah, I had enabled it. Amy and myself did a conversation yesterday when we were setting this up, and I enabled the breakout rooms, but for some reason they're not showing up on either of our screens. So apologies for that.
So that's no problem. I think we'll just try and have maybe an open conversation with the group. If people would like to take part in that, we can look at we have two questions to look at. So really the first question that we want to look at is looking at now and how we can have an opportunity to build back better. So we've all seen the hardships of kind of the pandemic over the last year. And maybe if we take a moment to just kind of think about what is the lessons that we have learned from COVID and how can we take that to kind of work towards strengthening our health system and respond to future pandemics. So really here, what we want to kind of think about is like, how do we develop better early warning systems? How do we manage risk reduction and manage the risk of global health? And what kind of resources that we need? Um, so what we might do is that if people wanted to kind of say a few things about that, we can kind of allow you to speak and try and start a bit of a discussion if anybody had any kind of thoughts on that question there. So what kind of lessons can we take from over the last year, having lived through COVID-19, to try and apply this to strengthen our health systems and respond to future pandemics? If you just want to use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen, if you can see that, raise your hand, and then I can just kind of allow you to talk to the group if there's anybody that would like to. Oh, uh, hi, Kristen, or Kirsten, if you just want to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kirsten. One of the things that bothered me a bit about the COVID pandemic is the mixed messages coming from the media and the government. There didn't seem to be at any time a firm or a level response or list of suggestions as to what we must undertake as individuals. Everything seemed to be up in the air. So I would like to see that this COVID pandemic will give the government and organizations a chance to look back and look at the issues and see how communication can be enhanced.
That's a really good point. Clear communication is so important for us, and it's something that really reassures us in situations where that can be quite troubling as well for us all. So yeah, building better kind of channels of communication, maybe thinking them through, is really important. Thanks for that, Kirsten. Is there anybody else that would like to add?
People are shy, obviously, this morning.
A little bit shy.
And I know the breakout rooms do give an opportunity for people in a smaller group, so apologies for that just not functioning on this at the moment. There was a question that came up in the chat there that I just saw around, I suppose it was to do with the environment, really, and it was around, you know, if firewood is the only source of energy, what is the situation with kind of, I suppose, care for the environment? And I'm not sure, I know Thokozani has left the call. I'm not sure, Aimée, if it's something that you are aware of, or maybe it's something we can actually find out from her and come back to people on, because that's an interesting one, actually. You know, is there reforestation going on? Is there, how is that being managed, I suppose, at a national level?
I think that's something I'd have to try.
Yeah.
I'd have to find out about. I wouldn't know offhand.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, so yeah.
No, it is a big source of income for a lot of people, collecting firewood and kind of selling it as well. So, in many of the countries, developing countries across Africa. So, yes, it's certainly something I think that it would be addressed, but I don't know exactly how that is done. We can follow up. Um,
if people have questions, please, as we say, just encourage you to. Oh, here we go. Thank you. There's one coming in, but just while that was happening, I was just thinking that what Thokozani has done for us this morning, I suppose, has brought an element of reality to life in Malawi for us, and we can see what's happening on the ground there. That's something we would like to do with the other countries, I suppose, that we're working in Ethiopia, in Mozambique, and in Tanzania. And is that something that people would be interested in doing at a later stage? That we learn a little bit more about life in those particular countries, and I suppose particularly the work that the Irish government through its Irish Aid programme is doing in those countries. Our link with Concern has been, this is the third time we've actually done one of these, so it's a chance, I suppose, for us to develop that relationship also. But I know that HelpAge have people on the ground in all of those countries. They just it's something we could pursue if people are interested in. And actually, sorry, I'm reading this. Sorry, I'm reading the comments as we're talking. Paula, thank you for that. That apparently there's a lot of work in the World Agroforestry Centre in Africa about replanting and managing trees, and that's including small scale forestation or whatever on farms, and that's also supported through Irish Aid and the Irish Embassy in Malawi.
And well, maybe I'll move on to the second question if this COVID question is a little bit different, because we would like to take a little time to focus on kind of good health and well-being today and the SDGs. I know Malawi is such an interesting subject, but perhaps we can kind of look at, the second question was going to be a future question. So imagine it's 2030 and the United Nations have congratulated Ireland on successfully achieving Sustainable Goal 3, good health and well-being for all. And how do you think that we might have achieved this? So this question is really kind of to try and encourage people to think about how the goals are interlinked, and how, if we wanted to achieve good health and well-being, what other kind of goals might we have kind of worked towards that would have a positive onset towards goal 3. So if anybody had any opinion on that or would like to share, or on the first question, again, you can just kind of raise your hand or pop it in the chat, either or. Oh, I think we have Karen. Karen, if you just want to unmute yourself.
Hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you very much for what you're doing, and it was a lovely presentation. But I would just like to go back to the COVID, and not just Malawi that would have problems in this, the whole world has problems. What are we going to do with our waste, our masks, our plastic, everything like that? I'm very, very concerned. You're walking down, even I live in a rural area, and up in my local shop, people just have the masks lying on the road. It's very frightening. And I hear the people who clean beaches and clean forests and woods and stuff like that, that they won't pick up this waste. So, you know, like Malawi will have a huge problem like that. So does the rest of the world.
Yes, it's a really good point. We have to kind of look at how we address our waste, and that kind of has an effect on the climate change and life on land and life on water if that kind of pollution got into those systems. So that is definitely something that is a huge lesson learned for future health systems.
Yeah, because just as we were talking about the huge lake, could you imagine if people are just throwing all their waste in, and then they're fishing, and people then are eating the fish, and it's a whole cycle of everything. I find that very frightening.
Thanks for that, Karen.
No problem.
I'm just going to give Kirsten has a comment to make as well. Kirsten, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, agreeing with what the last girl said about waste and waste management, and in particular about awareness. presumably towards 2030, we will have learned enough from the pandemic that we are in to begin to take more care and have more awareness of the issues in relation to risk reduction and disposing of rubbish. I find it particularly appalling to see masks being dumped on the street and in particular outside shops. The people who dump those masks, who do they think is going to pick them up? You know, I think if anything, what we should be learning is a greater awareness of personal responsibility and communication. I think I've sort of said that slightly before, so it might sound a little bit boring.
Not at all. It's a very valid point. I think we can all agree that to some extent, we need to take our own responsibility. I'm just going to let Annette talk here. She has something to say. Go ahead, Annette.
Hi. Mine is well, partly it's kind of for both sides. I remember when the pandemic first came to light, I was I couldn't bear to think about what was going to happen in Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, but it really hasn't taken hold as you know, you might have expected it to. But I watched a little, you know, podcast type thing on it, and the person was saying, you know, that the African populations do tend to be younger. You know, there aren't very many people in the vulnerable age, whether it be over 60, 65, 70. So, you know, they're not as likely to, you know, to be counted in the numbers. Obviously, there's the lack of testing. But then people are used to trying to avoid exposure to disease in these countries anyway. You know, there might be certain coping mechanisms that they already have in place, and it hasn't. I mean, South Africa is very high, but many of the other countries, they really haven't seen the same impact that we're experiencing here in Europe, and they don't have as many foreign visitors who would be bringing the virus in. So, you know, there's lots of things, and they don't travel around as much. You know, people might not be, they don't have cars as much. They might not be going from one end of the country to another. They tend to stay more in their own locality. So a lot of these things seem to have worked in their favour. And then going on to the next slide where you were asking about 2030 and thinking about, you know, what's happened in Ireland. I think a lot of the things that we need to work on are being exposed during this time, you know, particularly it's good health and well-being. I think mental health services, particularly at a point where they can't do face-to-face consultations and speak with people, but the fact that people are, you know, isolation is being more exposed really, because there's been people living in isolation during when Age Action first, I work with Age Action, by the way. When Age Action, when we first started reacting to the first lockdown, we rang everybody and we found people that were in dire straits, and it wasn't so much because of the pandemic that they were living that way, but they were living that way anyway. So, you know, it seems to have exposed a lot of the flaws that were there, and, you know, we need to, when we come out of this, look at ways of future-proofing it. You know, that there aren't people who live alone who you know, who need a lot more support. And then, you know, we're all at a space. I'm living alone at the moment, and you know, trying to keep my physical and mental health protected during this difficult time. So, you know, we're trying to share tips on how you can do this, but then we all need to help each other. You know, there's a lot. Ireland is a great country. and we help people overseas, and then we need to help ourselves here as well, and look out for the people who need support. So we just really all have to take care of one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, building better support services is something we should look at for strengthening our overall health system. And actually, one of there's 13 targets for goal 3, and one of the main actions that the UN suggests that we should all take is that number 1 is to look after our own health and well-being and those around us. So that's something that is really important to be able to achieve, to strengthening um, our achieving goal 3, and yeah, looking at it in the future. Um, Anybody else that would like to share any comments? Either of those goals or either of those questions, sorry. I think as Annette says, some of the lessons that we've learned from COVID-19 is that some of our aspects of our society are not as strong as they we might have thought they've been, but we've also seen a lot of positives, I think, from COVID-19, in that we are actually quite able to adapt quite quickly. So hopefully that will hold strong to us for the future as well.
I think one of the things, and this is being selfish, and just going back to some of the stuff that Annette was talking about, was that as an organisation, and Annette and myself work in the area of trying to promote lifelong learning among older people. Our Youth 3A network has a network of around 30 groups around the country. They obviously haven't met since March. But one of the things that I suppose this, if one can take a positive out of this, is that it has meant that we're no longer geographically confined. Prior to this, if somebody was in the Limerick or County Limerick area, they had to travel to Limerick City to go and be part of a group. Now, using Zoom and using these virtual platforms, which we've all become familiar with over the last time, we've opened up, I suppose, the discussion. We've opened up these groups to people who would never have been able to access them otherwise. And I think going back to what was it Karen was saying about, I think there is an element of personal responsibility among all of us to not only just to ensure that the area in which we live and the area around us is kept clean and as free and as hygienic as possible, but also that we pass that message on to those we're in contact with, be it a younger person in our a family member, be it somebody, if you see somebody doing something like disposing of a mask on the street or whatever, that we actually have a responsibility. Each of us has a responsibility to say something and to call that out and say, that's not right, please pick that up and dispose of it properly. I do think that element of responsibility for all of us is there. And I think one of the things about the conversation this morning with Thokozani is to let us see that, it's not just within our own 4 walls. We're all confined as opposed to within, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 3 kilometers? 5 kilometers. Sorry, I get confused with the levels at the moment. But how we're all confined within our own space. But yet we're able to contact somebody, we're able to have a conversation with somebody in Malawi and to learn a little bit about their life and what's happening there. And I think that it has opened up the world to us in a way that our own worlds have closed down, if that makes sense.
Well, I think we might just go to the last slide, which is talk about the actions that we might be able to think about personally taking, which is, as I say, because today we're talking about goal 3, which is good health and well-being. Is that number 1, look after your own health and those around you, and then it's really good to talk to people. Conversation is powerful. And so I hope that we learned a little bit about the sustainable development goals today, and perhaps you'd like to talk to your family and friends about what you've learned. If you want to take further action, something that you're really passionate about, I suggest that you talk to your My apologies. It seems I was talking to myself, but I just thought that we would move on to some of the actions that you might be able to to take. So just thinking about today, if we were thinking about good health and well-being, the number one action is to, as the United Nations say, is to look after your own health and those around you. If I hope that you've learned a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and that you might be inspired to go and read more about them. And then kind of, we really believe conversation is really the most powerful tool. So if there's any issues you think of for us nationally, for us globally, you should talk to your family or friends and just have a conversation around those things. And then if you wanted to if you really felt passionate about things, you could always talk to your local councillors, your TDs, or the policy makers, and you could get involved with local community groups, or even consider signing up for some kind of advocacy and campaigning for issues. I know that Age Action does a lot of campaigning for support services for older people in Ireland, so that might be something that you feel quite passionate about. You can always find out more about international development at Irish Aid website. It's irishaid.ie, and you can find out more about the Sustainable Development Goals on the UN.org. We'd really love if you'd like to stay in touch with us at Project Us, so that's our email address, and we're always happy to host more cafes. We can talk about the SDGs more, so if you're interested in hosting a cafe or might know a group, you can always get in touch. I hope, sorry about the not being able to go into small breakout rooms today, but I hope some of the conversation was interesting, and I know Thokozani's conversation was really, really very interesting, and hopefully it's kind of triggered some different thoughts where you can compare what life is like in Ireland and compared to what life is like in somewhere like Malawi. So thanks very much. Billy, do you have anything to say?
No, just want to say thank you, Aimée, to you and to Michael and all the gang in concern for helping us out today and facilitating this. And obviously our thanks to Thokozani. She had to leave to go to another meeting, but I did send her a message in the chat before she left, just thanking her on behalf of us all. Lynn has asked her about will we be sharing the slides. Yes, I've recorded this whole meeting, Lynn, so that they will be up on our YouTube channel. So if you go onto YouTube and you just put in, or if you search in Google for YouTube Age Action YouTube channel, it will bring them up. They won't be up for a couple of hours, but they will be up there hopefully by the end of the day. So if anybody wants to go back and review or share this talk with anybody else, then please, you can do so there. I just wanted, yes, sorry, Aimée.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I can certainly share we can share the slides with people who are registered, if that's okay. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Need to just do a little follow up, and so they can have all the links there.
And I just wanted to say one last thing, I suppose, really, which was in relation to our next meeting, which is taking place on November the 12th. I did meet it, I mentioned it there at the beginning, where we have a conversation with Roddy Doyle, and that will be at 10:30 a.m. on Thursday, November the 12th. So if you haven't registered for it already and you do wish to register, please just email us at events@ageaction.ie. And there was a comment came in from about rather than sharing a link with each of the goals, would we have a template around the targets for each of the goals? Yes, I think that's something we can certainly send out if people are interested in. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody. If there's nothing else, if anybody has anything else to share, now's your chance, because I will just, I'll call this meeting to an end. We did say that we would keep these meetings to an hour, and I suppose I'm trying to be strict about that, because I do know that people have other things to do. So if you've committed to being part of this, they will take place at 10:30 every second Thursday morning, and they will finish within the hour. So please pass the word on to your friends, and thank you all very much for this morning, and good morning to you all. Stay safe.
Yes, thanks very much, everybody.